Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, this morning, BC's Attorney General was in Grand Forks to issue another apology to members of the Doukhobor community. We'll speak with a survivor who's written a book about her time when she was forced to attend the New Denver school. And Dr. Bonnie Henry is urging an expansion of the prescribed safe supply program, saying the ethics outweigh concerns, including diversion of those prescribed drugs. What's your reaction? And it is a Minter Friday. Call us with your gardening questions. I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. BC's Attorney General Nikki Sharma formally apologized yesterday to the survivors and their families of the New Denver school. This was in Castlegar. Now, she acknowledged that the children were mistreated both physically and psychologically at the school. And she said, quote, "This is not a proud history. The province of British Columbia recognizes the stigma and trauma experienced by the Sons of Freedom and the broader Doukhobor community." Now, hundreds of the community's children were taken away from their families and confined at the school, which was a former sanitarium, for up to 6 years. The parents were also fined, jailed, and their property seized between 1931 and 1959. The formal apology also came with the announcement of a compensation package of $10 million for community programs and education to recognize the historical wrongs committed by the government of the day. While many survivors and their families were present in Castlegar, survivors could also attend virtually. And one of those survivors is Elizabeth Lukoff. Now, she will join us in just a moment. She's actually written a book about her experience, and it is called Drawer 49, New Denver, BC. It's a memoir of her time there. We are hoping to connect with Elizabeth Lukoff, and she is joining us now on the phone. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking.
What does this apology mean to you?
It just gives validation to the fact that we didn't do anything wrong. We were just children. And what happened to us should have never happened. It was quite emotional. I didn't expect it to be, but it was.
Why was it so emotional?
Because everything came back. See, now I'm getting emotional. I don't plan on being emotional here, so
it's okay.
Just all the memories and the being separated from your parents was very difficult, very difficult. And we never received, well, it's kind of like the Indigenous residential schools. We never received any love. We never received any nurturing. There was never touch, no hugs. There was this trap for various things. And I'm not saying that every person that worked there was mean and miserable. There were some nice ones.
You were only 7 when you were taken there, is that right?
Yes.
And you were there till you were 12 years old?
Yeah, just before I turned 12.
Wow. I can't imagine how hard that was for you as such a young child. Why did you want to write a book about it?
Actually, this wasn't meant to be a book. What happened was about 6 or 7 years ago. I was I thought I had dealt with all that. I was fine. But about 7 years ago, the stories kept popping into my mind, and so I wrote them down. And then at one point, I was talking to somebody. I'd been away from the community for most of my life. And he started telling me about the trauma of people that he knew, the divorces and the alcoholism, even suicide, the lack of ability to parent. And I didn't realize that, because parenting was my best thing. Probably too lenient and gave my sons too much freedom. But if anybody would have to come for them. Like I told Melody, as a pacifist, I probably would have killed him. I mean, my children meant everything.
You felt the pain that perhaps your parents went through.
Yeah. Well, my mom tried to bring up New Denver, and I basically snapped at her and said that I wouldn't speak to her if she brought it up anymore. So, but when these stories started coming up, I just wrote them down. And then when I learned about what was happening to so many of my fellow inmates, I was encouraged to publish it, which then I did. My brother actually paid for it. He was not in New Denver. He was too young yet. So I actually sent my book to the then Premier, John Horgan, and got a lovely note from him saying that it was a history that needed to be told.
How do you feel about, there have been repeated calls from the community, from the ombudsperson's reports for an apology, that it took this long?
Well, I think that if it had come earlier, and if maybe the children wouldn't have gone through so much trauma, if there was help given and counseling and such. But I think better late than never. I think what it really needs to show us is that it's not only the government, as citizens, when we see wrong being done, we need to speak up.
And that's part of the apology and the compensation package, to look at education, to right, quote, historical wrongs. What do you hope comes of that, those education measures and efforts?
Yeah, I actually haven't thought about that because, to be honest, I never expected any kind of package of compensation. They said they were going to apologize, but I didn't expect that. So I haven't really thought about it, and I really don't know what it all means.
For your book, who were you hoping to reach out to or to educate through sharing your horrible experiences?
Well, I think that it's reached the people. I mean, a lot of the former inmates have read the book, and it just, that, I'm not sure what that did or not, but those who weren't involved that have read the book were astounded that this happened. They didn't know, and there was quite a number of people that read the book that had no idea.
And that's interesting, Elizabeth, for people who have heard about this apology and heard the news and perhaps just have a cursory understanding of what took place with the Doukhobor community. What do you want the public to understand and learn as these apologies take place?
I think my thing is about children. I mean, children are so vulnerable, and they're at the mercy of adults, whether they have good intentions or bad intentions, and governments and all of that. And I think I want people to think of children as human beings. I mean, all my time there, all I could figure out, all I thought about, well, there was a couple of things. I was always hungry. Not that there wasn't food there. There was plenty of food, but I constantly wrote letters to my parents for food, avocados and pomegranates and bread and all kinds of things. And it was only after I wrote this and I thought about it, it wasn't my belly that needed filling. It was my heart. So that was like a metaphor for what I was really lacking.
Are you hopeful for healing? There were children of families of survivors and, as you called them, inmates at yesterday's event, you were able to watch through online. Um, are you hopeful for more healing?
Yes, I am. I am. One of the I saw an interview with Lorraine Walton, whose mom and dad and her uncle were taken away, and she was quite an advocate for this. And I think there was her comment was that she felt that maybe they had found peace too.
Elizabeth, I really appreciate your joining us today and appreciate your sharing your perspective. I know it's emotional, but it's very important to hear your account. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Lukoff is an author and survivor of the New Denver School. 12:17 now, 1:17 in the Mountain Time Zone. And Nikki Sharma is scheduled to deliver the apology today, this morning in Grand Forks, and Premier David Eby as well will deliver an apology in the provincial legislature on February 27th. 12:17 now, 1:17 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. And yesterday, the Attorney General was in Castlegar. And here's Sharma speaking to reporters following yesterday's apology.
We also talked about a package of $10 million that will go towards a range of things, including health and wellness for the community, but also commemoration and archival work to make sure that never happens again and we don't forget.
And as you heard, Lorraine Walton is the child of a man who was taken as a child to the New Denver School. She was also in Castlegar, and here she is speaking now.
It's just this big sense of relief and emotions because both of my parents and my uncle are deceased. And they're here with us in spirit, and I think that they heard that apology because there was just this lifting off of everybody, I think, in that room, and those souls are finally at peace.
That's Lorraine Walton, who spoke yesterday in Castlegar and was speaking with the CBC following the apology from BC's Attorney General Nikki Sharma for those historical wrongs that were caused to the community of the Doukhobors and specifically the Sons of Freedom and the broader Doukhobor community as well. And as we mentioned, there will be a provincial official apology in the legislature in the coming weeks. BC's provincial health officer has issued her recommendations regarding the prescribed safe supply program in the province. We brought you that news yesterday. Now, Dr. Bonnie Henry's report calls on the BC government to expand the availability and the types of drugs covered under the program. It has been increasingly controversial, and Dr. Henry acknowledged it carries some risks, including the diversion of drugs prescribed from the patient it was prescribed for to someone else. Overall, health officials at yesterday's news conference concluded the program is ethically defensible to provide drug users with pharmaceutical alternatives to toxic illicit substances to reduce their considerable risk of death, even if it results in some potential harms to the broader population. We're asking you, what's your reaction to the call to expand the program? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Guy Felicella is a peer clinical advisor at the BC Centre on Substance Use and joins us now. Hello, Guy. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
What's your reaction to the recommendations and the concerns raised about the program?
Well, I mean, it's, anytime you can get an alternative to that toxic drug supply, it's a good thing. I just don't think there's enough people being able to access the safer supply programs. And I also understand the risks outside of that, but the reality is the risk for people from using the toxic drug supply far outweighs the risks of a safer supply program. So, in a sense that these programs that are available are so small in nature. So they do need to be scaled up. I mean, the goal really here is to try to save lives at all costs, and remove people as much as possible from that toxic drug supply, because that's the drug supply that's killing 7 people every single day. It's not safer supply that's killing anybody. So you really have to look at what's causing the most damage, and then how do you reduce the harms of that? And that is the toxic drug supply.
Part of what they talked about yesterday was acknowledging that sometimes hydromorphone is not the drug that will work with users. It is what's mainly prescribed, and what Dr. Bonner Henry is calling for is broadening the availability and types of drugs that can be prescribed. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Hydromorphone doesn't work for a lot of people, and so we have to have an expansion of substances that meet the needs of people who are using them. Like, if not, then people will continue to only access that unregulated drug supply, and so yeah, these are the things that need to be done to reduce the harms of the deaths that are being caused in all our communities. And yeah, it's a good thing that it's being looked at to move forward. But like I said, if hydromorphone isn't working for somebody, there has to be something else there that is, and that can be other substances as well.
How do you think that might address the issue, the concerns around, what's called diversion, which is when a patient who's prescribed for doesn't use it, or transfers it or sells it to someone else?
Well, I think, listen, the program of safer supply program is so small. Diversion is something that it's exists in our society for decades. It's just, what's happened is that nobody said anything about diversion for years and years and years, and this has become sort of like a political hot potato with being prescribed prescriptions for people, medications for people to remove them from the toxic drug supply. So people have been launching onto this small stature safer supply program instead of looking at the whole picture that diversion is something that's not new in our society. It does happen. And I'm not disputing that it hasn't happened or it doesn't happen in safer supply, but that goes back to saying that, if the hydromorphone isn't working, then give them something that will.
But given it is a public health program, and the purpose of this report was to measure its efficacy at this point, isn't that something that does need to be addressed under the auspices of this program?
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, diversion is something that you try to do in place to limit the amount of drugs that are diverted at anything. And I mean, I think the programs are always being evaluated and reevaluated, and how they can be better to meet the needs of people. So in that sense, that's always ongoing in any program. Especially ones that I've been involved with meetings about, is that it's just constantly evaluated, updated, looked upon. How can it be better? What needs to go? What needs to stay? Those types of things are on a daily basis.
We're taking reaction on the open line as well. What are your thoughts on the recommendation, the call from BC's provincial health officer to expand and broaden the availability and types of drugs covered under BC's prescribed safer supply program? And this was issued in her report she announced yesterday and released yesterday. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 as well. Harlan is calling us from Nanaimo. Hi, Harlan. Harlan, are you there? We may have lost our connection.
Hello?
Hi, Harlan, can you hear me?
Hi, yeah, you betcha.
Yes, go ahead. What are your thoughts about the prescribed safe supply program?
Yeah, so I'm just curious in general about sort of the use of stigma towards the drug use, and then as well as the safe supply program. And I want to preface this with I want to separate. I know they're sort of closely linked, but I want to separate mental health and drug use apart from each other, and say that I definitely don't think that mental health and mental health treatment should be stigmatized. But what I get confused with is if we look at any sort of, broad social behaviors that have negative consequences, and the ones that come to mind off the top of my head are, say, smoking cigarettes or drinking and driving. We see a broad use of stigma to work as a societal force to bring those things back in check. And I think that there's probably a lot of empirical evidence that says that when that stigma is enacted and the access to those things are reduced, then you end up getting a change in the societal behavior. And I mean, you can even see that with, the way they're banning all cigarette sales to in New Zealand and stuff like that. And where it doesn't make sense is it feels like they're trying, the government is trying to remove all barriers to access to drugs. And I don't understand how that is, how that is going to affect change. And I think that I personally believe that all of the drug use is a byproduct of a mental health crisis, and we're speaking about two things that are linked together. But okay. I think that you can support the mental health crisis while also not supporting the open use of drugs and all of the negative societal effects that it has that we're seeing on our streets every day.
Okay, so I think we've gotten to your point there. So you're saying amid this public health crisis, is part of what you're saying? Why is the focus so much on safe supply?
No, I'm saying that with other health crises, such as drinking and driving or smoking cigarettes, they use stigma as a tool to change the societal behavior.
Right.
Whereas with the drug use, they're trying to remove all the barriers of stigma and saying, no, the stigma shouldn't work.
Okay.
Where if we look back, there may be some use that the stigma has helped on a broad scale to change societal behavior.
Okay. I wonder what you think about, something that I've heard a lot, which is stigma is part of what has caused deaths because people are not wanting to use those drugs that are toxic, around other people, or are reluctant to seek help. I know we're kind of going back and forth on what stigma really means here, but I wonder what your reaction is to that.
And I would say, again, like my personal view is that that drug use is a symptom of mental health. And so I do sort of accept that there is, has been historically a stigma around, admitting and getting help for mental health. But if our health system in general had more upstream services before people were at the point of using drugs, and then there was also a societal stigma around the use of drugs, we could probably help the people before they get to that point. I'm not saying it's going to fix the problem on the street at the moment, but I mean, if there was more of an investment into the upstream health side, and less of a let's give out free drugs as much as possible, it may help get to the root of the problem instead of dealing with it in a reactive way that's just, trying to stop deaths. And I think, like, if you look at the overdose numbers that have just come out, the strategy obviously isn't working.
Harlan, I really appreciate this conversation. Thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah, take care. That's Harlan in Nanaimo. Guy Felicello, what are your thoughts on that? Using stigma as almost as a deterrent, or trying to move away from removing barriers to drug use?
It's just been proven not to work, and I don't think we've stigmatized, smoking or alcohol or cannabis as well. I think we've done education on those topics that provide a wealth of information and knowledge for people. Goes back to the part with prevention, telling people to or shaming them for using drugs. And it's also another thing that's interesting that I often think about as well, is that we point fingers at the circumstances where we see somebody using the drugs, but we don't understand the story behind the person of how they got there. So we essentially shame them for sometimes their abuse that they've dealt with, whether that's verbal, sexual abuse, or physical abuse. And so all these abuses get wrapped up into it. But what we do is when we stigmatize people who use drugs, we push them to use alone in dark places. And sadly, with the toxic drug supply, they die.
The Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Jennifer Whiteside, talked yesterday about, this is part of a continuum of care, and that is what the government is doing, according to her. What do you make of I guess what Harlan was saying there, which is that, he talks about the root causes around mental health. You've just talked about that. What about focusing on the upstream, on those prevention measures dealing with the mental health issues?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with that we need to do a far better job much earlier on. But this goes back to a lot of things as well, too, educating the parents on how to talk to your kids. It's at the school system level. Throughout our society, we need to have community forums to educate people. It's okay to have open and honest conversations. I think what happens is that a lot of people are afraid to have these conversations because they feel that it might start something in their kids, or if their kids go down this path. So that's on us as a society, and also to do better and be better to provide those education sessions for our kids. I know it's a big thing, but I think in schools that we could alleviate some of the classes that are out of there for social studies and put in some topics like of today's current issues that are really impacting our society. And one of them, sadly, is the toxic drug crisis, prohibition, and, just some learning tools that people have a deep understanding of, the circumstances we're in now, but also what created the policies to get us to where we are too.
Guy, I appreciate your joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Guy Felicella is a peer clinical advisor at the BC Centre on Substance Use. 12:32 now, 1:32 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. And coming up, Brian Minter will join us for his regular gardening column here. And of course, you can call in with your questions. That's coming up after this CBC News Update with Belle Puri.
Good afternoon. The NHL will not release findings of its own investigation into the sexual assault allegations involving 5 members of the 2018 Canadian World Junior team. Criminal charges have been filed. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman had pledged to make the league findings public. Now he says the legal process must play out first before the league takes any action. An encampment at Vancouver's Eburn Park in the Marpole area is being dismantled. Staff from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure are clearing items from the park with garbage bins and an excavator. Residents were told on Monday they had 3 days to remove their tents and belongings and leave. BC Health Minister Adrian Dix supports the federal government's decision to delay expansion of eligibility criteria for medical assistance in dying. The proposal related to cases where mental illness is the sole underlying medical condition. Dix says he was among the ministers who called for more consideration of the possible expansion. A look at the BC weather along the north coast, mainly sunny, a high of 2 degrees. In the Peace region, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 9. For the central interior, showers late this afternoon, a high of 8 degrees. In the southeast, showers as well, a high of 5. Southern interior, mainly cloudy and 6. Greater Victoria, some noon hour showers, then mostly some sun and cloud. And in Metro Vancouver, showers and a high of 11 degrees. That's the CBC News from Vancouver.
We have Brian Minter coming up next. And he's joining us from Chilliwack, which is probably safer for him because every time he comes, he just gets accosted on his way out by producers.
Absolutely. I always have questions for him. But, I have to tell you, yesterday, rushing out the door for work, I had to stop and take a picture of my flower bed. Oh. My bulbs are like this.
Already?
Yes. And actually, second time around, because before Christmas, they were starting to pop up. And then I put sea soil all over them and telling them, stay in the ground.
Hold off just a moment.
But they're all up already.
Yes, and I saw a colleague of ours posting pictures of crocuses over in Victoria. So yes, I know. I wanted to talk to him about that too. Things coming up. But I mean, is it something that's bringing you some delight? I mean, it's color amid all this gray.
And, I've seen some daffodils, the mini daffodils, and it's great. But you know what's going to happen, of course. We think spring is around the corner and then we're going to have like another snowstorm or something.
Yes, exactly. Then we'll say, what happened? It's January. It's February.
We're in February.
That's what happened. Well, Belle, you hang on and you listen to Brian and see if there's going to be some advice for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Belle. That's Val Fury in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And yes, we're going to get lots of good advice from Brian. He's just come back from Germany visiting a gardening show there where he says, they really are years ahead when it comes to gardening tips and trends. So he's going to share some of what he's learned there. This is BC Today on CBC. We are on Radio 1 at 89.7 FM in Dawson Creek and in Clearwater 860 AM. Thanks for joining us. We're also on CBC Television. Thank you for joining us there this week, starting this week, and live streaming also on our website, cbc.ca/BC, or on YouTube at CBC Vancouver. You can also use the CBC News app. It's 12:36 now, 1:36 in the Mountain Time Zone. And yes, every second Friday, we are joined by our gardening columnist, Brian Minter. You can call in with your questions for him, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, you can reach us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And Brian joins me now from Country Garden Limited. Yes, in Chilliwack. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Michelle, it's wonderful. What a gorgeous day out there. Absolutely. I think every bulb who's coming up right now deserves this weather after a couple of weeks ago. So no, it's a wonderful day. And in our area, the groundhog did not see his shadow. So I'm very happy about that.
Okay. All right. I know, but it's different depending on which groundhog you're listening to, though.
Okay. Yep.
Tell us about your trip.
Oh my gosh. The largest horticultural show in the world happens once a year in January in Essen, Germany. And 43 countries around the world participate in terms of having new and unusual creative product, that whatever's just being bred, new ideas, technology. It's mind-blowing. But the green was the feature theme this year. First of all, in terms of Europe is running out of peat moss. England will be not allowed to use peat moss next year. So for the growers, and they're massive growers over there, looking at substrates, what can they use other than peat moss, and a lot of research going into that, which is great. And also the big thing is environmental plants. That's one of the most important thing. They have plant groupings right now for hot, dry urban areas, for wild rewilding areas, and so a lot of plants being developed for those particular areas that with extreme changes in climate, which is good. But the third thing that came up is robotics, and we're in some the greenhouses to give you some sense of scale and size. This one greenhouse we had visited over there in the busy season sends out 1,000 trucks of flowers a day.
Oh my gosh.
1,000, yes. Can you imagine the scale? And yes, going, well, there's a lot of people in Europe, and they travel quite easily one
they
time
like
to
their
the
flowers.
But yes, and just some of the operations, it was robots who were doing the work in the greenhouses, and a person who was familiar with how to fix them and change things if it didn't work, and charming a couple of young ladies who were doing all the work of about 50 people, but robotics is something. And in the show, they're very, very becoming very user-friendly, more practical, and but it was good. But Michelle, let me tell you, the scope and scale of new plants over there and new varieties of plants is really mind-blowing. It was just phenomenal. And of course, floral design is a part of that. European designers are great. They picked out some of the best, have crowds around them, are doing these crazy, beautiful things, but they're incorporating nature into all the designs right now. Twigs and nature and sticks is all part of it, but they're just so excited. It's a hustling show where you see so many different things in such a short period of time, and the breeding and getting to talk to some of the breeders over there in terms of some of their challenges. One of the most interesting things I discovered was we all know that hydrangeas, when we have them inside our homes or in the garden, if they get really, really dry, they just wilt. They just will not wilt. One of the breeders showed me this new variety they're working on. It was bone dry, it didn't even wilt a little bit.
Wow.
So that's a type of research that's going on.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
It's going to come in handy.
It's going to come very, very handy. And again, talk about environmental planning. That's really a good one. Yeah, it's great.
Well, Brian, I know you want to talk about perennials as well, what we can expect as we head into spring. But I just want to take Anthony here at Harrison Hot Springs because he called in early with a question for you. Hi, Anthony.
Hello.
Hello there. Go ahead. Yes.
So Brian, I bought a blue spruce in a pot from your garden center about 3 years back, and I planted it in a really nice sunny spot, well drained. I did all the things that I was told, added everything, the bone meal and everything else, and it was expected to have about 8 to 12 inches growth per year. And I've had it for 3 years now, and it's probably growing maybe 2 or 3 inches a year. So I have about 6 inches growth. And I was just wondering if I was using the wrong fertilizer, or if there's a different fertilizer I could be using.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. Blue spruce, and I'm glad it was in a container, take a couple of years and to really get established. They have to get the roots out first of all, and I'm sure you have very good soil. That's why you always recommend bark mulch going into the earth so the soil's open and porous and it draws new roots out. But what it's done in the first couple of years, they don't have nice fibrous roots. They have kind of thick roots that take a while to get established, and that's really what's happened. And I'm not sure which you had a chance to feed it, but again, for this year, give it some timed release fertilizer, like something that's equivalent for trees and shrubs, high nitrogen, slow release. And I'm sure if you've got buds on the tree, we could go and take a look right now that this year, because it's now become established, that you'll get your normal growth. I just would, be very, very certain that that's going to happen. Because if everything else is well, the color is good and you've got the buds on the tree, it's just getting an established time. And then you'll get your 8 to 12 or even 14 inches of growth a year on that beautiful blue spruce.
Wow, perfect. Do you have something at your garden center like that you specifically recommend?
Yeah, you just make your way over there.
Yeah, if you come and see me, I'll just give you something that that I think will make a big difference for you to help you.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'll keep an eye out for you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's great, Anthony. You. Thanks so much. Just, mosey on over. He's in Harrison Hot Springs. He'll go over to Chilliwack. Thank you very much for your call. And so, Brian, tell us about, what we can be planting to perhaps bring some more of that color to our gardens.
Well, in this weather, when it's 10 degrees or more, Michelle, the early pollinators, the bees, are out looking for nectar and pollen. And I'm happy to see that Bell has a lot of bulbs coming up right now, because bulbs are great pollinator attractors, like the crocus in particular. If you look in the center, they've got those little anthers out there ready to go. And but one of the things that's being overlooked, and there's so many of them right now, are the beautiful helleborus. Now, we always talk about the Christmas rose before Christmas that blooms, but what I love about them is they're consistent, and they would have stood up beautifully in this very cold weather we had a couple of weeks ago, but now they're bouncing back with lots of buds, lots of blooms, and all the pollinators are out right now. It provides nectar and pollen. So not only the helleborus, which are now in full bloom, some of the early arabis and abricias are poking their noses up, and some of the snowdrops are coming up right now. So, in the idea, and this is the beauty of having these helleborus, they're really resilient, hardy perennial, but a good pollinator, nice to have color in the garden. But it's the idea of combining them. If I had a big, deep purple helleborus, I'd put some white snowdrops around it to, really create that look, or some of the winter aconites around that are yellow. So it's the art of combining things that is really very, very important. So if you see them, there's a lot around in garden stores around the province right now, and up north, as soon as because they're hardy to zone 5, as soon as the ground thaws, please get them in. But this time of year, you can see the colors and see how they can add so much to your garden.
Sure. Just what a gorgeous deep purple those helleborus are. Let's take some more calls. Brian Minter is with me, and as always, he's here to take your gardening questions. He joins us with tips as well, of course, that are timely for your garden, but you can call in with your own questions. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Ryan is up next now in Langley. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Brian. How are you doing?
Great, Ryan. Thank you.
Good. So I have a question about rhododendrons, about cuttings. My great-grandmother, she passed away years ago. She has a house in North Van, and the owners there, she has rhodos in front of it that are about 60 years old, and the owners have let me take cuttings the last couple of years, but I haven't been able to make them go.
Yep, they're a tough one, and they really are difficult. What I would do at this point here, because they've had a bit of a rough go even in Langley right now, I would wait until the new growth comes out in the spring, and then wait.
What's the best time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The thing is, you wait until we call it the new growth becomes turgid, quite strong and tough and resilient. In other words, if you cut it, it just won't wilt down. Okay. So I would say probably late June, July. Would be a great time to take that fresh new growth in cuttings. Remember, cut the leaves in half. Take your cuttings about 4 or 5 inches long, and put them in a mixture of a really good potting soil and more about a third sand added to that. And that'll get you mixed. Be sure to cover them with plastic, like a dry cleaning bag over top, because what that will do, if you miss the inside, it'll keep it nice and humid. It'll hold the plant in place until the roots have a chance to form.
Okay. Great. And do I use some sort of root tech, stim, or anything?
Yeah, the root stimulator, there's several out there. They act like a weed killer. What they do is try and make it grow so quickly that, that it explodes. But when it starts to grow quickly, it just develops has enough in it to make the roots develop. So I think with the rhodos, I definitely would use, a root stimulator to get it going. Rooting powder. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Sounds like you're on your way, Ryan.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for the question about your rhododendrons. That, again, our number 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And Owen is calling us now from Vancouver with a question about trying to manage some grapevines. Hi, Owen.
Hello. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Owen. How can we help you?
We have a very old grapevine. It's about 75 years old.
Wow.
It's butted up against our house. It's part of the history of the property. We are looking at having to do some renovations, and we're looking at the prospect of moving the vine, but we're not quite sure how to do that. I'm wondering if you have any suggestions.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's going to be a challenge, Owen, particularly the size of the plant. But if you are serious about it, now's the time to do it. I wouldn't wait till later. You want to move it while it's dormant. So what I would do is I would really prune the whole plant back very, very hard. In other words, take all the new growth away, go back to the main stem, and then, of course, some of the subsequent branching coming out of that main stem. So in terms of size, maybe 4 or 5 feet across, I would cut it back to that harsh. And then what you need to do is, because grapes have very long roots, let me tell you, they go forever. So what you have to do now is, I would say, about maybe 4 feet out is what I would do in diameter, not in, in radius, but 4 feet out in diameter, and start making a trench right around the tree. Cut down any roots you have, cut them carefully, and so basically try and get a structure of roots of that. That will give you enough to work with, and then you'll have to start coming in, because you're not going to lift something that's 4 feet with that amount of soil around it. But basically take it away, try and secure a decent root system to the point where it's manageable to be able to lift with 3 or 4 people, or if you have a bit of machinery, to get it out of the ground. And the other thing is, make sure you've got a spot to put it right away. Don't just take it out. The moment it's out of the ground, let's put it back into another location as quickly as we can, and put lots of bark mulch in the planting hole, and you should be fine. Remember, keep it at the same depth and lots of bark on the soil, and you should be fine. It's a big job, Owen, for something that old, but that's what you have to do. But at the same time, and this is really important, at the very tips of the plant, of the woody growth on the tips, I need you to take some cuttings at this time of year. Take lots of grape cuttings, just in case for some reason you lose the plant or things don't work out.
Right.
If you take some cuttings, you'll have something that will root. And just as we talked to Ryan earlier about the rhodo cuttings, grape cuttings, it's a great time to be able to take them right now, and make sure you cut them 4 or 5 inches long with a little node on the bottom, and put them in a well-drained potting soil with some sand added to it, and they should root reasonably well for you. So 2 things to be able to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Thank you. Owen, a good luck.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. A big job ahead. And I love that he's got an insurance plan in case the
Yep.
whole vine, hopefully not, but doesn't work out. That's a big job ahead, Owen. Thanks very much for that. Good luck to you. We have an email from Leah in Cranbrook. And Leah writes, I'd love to try espaliering. Espaliering.
Yes, you bet. Yeah.
Espaliering some trees in my garden to border the main walk. Apples on one side and beech on the other. And so she's asking for some advice.
Yeah, I just going through Germany, I saw an espaliered beech tree. Probably they had trained it along a long area, 100 feet long. So can we do this? Absolutely. And what you really want to do in espalier is, and again, now would be a good time to start. And depending on how cold the weather is, but it's a good time to start right now. And what you essentially want to do is take all the branches off the tree that go, where a fence would be or coming directly out from the fence, leaving just side branching that is going, east and west on the plant. So in other words, getting rid of all the stuff that's going to be an impediment to run it along a fence and save the other ones. And then it's a question of choosing your branches. You can do as many as you like, but I would recommend starting with 3 sets initially. I look at in terms of how high you're going, usually knee high for 1 set of branches on the bottom, about waist high for the branches in the middle, and if you want to do a 3rd set, about chest high. That would give you about the right proportion in terms of how you're going to espalier. And you could always leave options to go higher if you wish, if you want more privacy and so on. But it's and that's it, both for the beech and for the apple tree. Easy to do. It's maintaining your good structure of branches that are going in the direction you want. Get rid of everything else, and then training it as it comes along. Taking your best branches, thinning it out, getting the shape that you'd like to have. I do exactly the same thing. I've got a long fence, and I've got apples and peaches and everything all along this wonderful fence. And it's just so nice to see. It's beautiful in winter, wonderful when the flowers and when the fruit comes on. It's spectacular. So good on you. This is wonderful.
Sounds like a great project you've got ahead of you, Leah. Thank you so much for your email. Let's go back to our callers. Susan is on the line in Nanaimo, and you have a question about an old red Japanese maple.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Yes.
As I said, I think I've lost half of it.
Oh no.
This particular, and all that's happened is the heat dome and then the intense heat last year again.
Yeah.
And when it went to blossom out with these beautiful red leaves, half the branches didn't produce anything. The ones that did, some of them started to dry up, like crinkle up, and I don't know if I've lost it. It's been in the ground probably 30 years. I don't do anything to it. I kind of ignore it, except chop out some branches when it's interfering with the security light.
Right. They do grow, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, Susan, a couple of things. Right now, you could go and look at the tree, and on some of the branching that's left, if you see tiny buds on the outside of the tree, they're starting to swell a wee bit right now. But if you see tiny buds on the outside of the tree, you know that the plant is going to be fine. And also on any of the branches, if you just scrape the branches gently and there's green just under the bark and what we call the cambium layer, you know that the tree is viable and going to be good. Now, the other thing, Susan, if you're going to prune it, anytime you take dead wood out of the tree, you can do that anytime. Saw it out, cut it out carefully. But in terms of any more pruning, I always wait until it leaves out first of all, and then I do my pruning because it recovers very, very quickly. There's a few diseases that affect Japanese maples, and so it's going to be training and pruning a tree, trying to get back its shape when the new growth starts to come along. The other thing is I would refresh it. I'm sorry?
So if I scrape the branches and there's no green and they're just dead, like they're just brown,
that's
then
dead wood.
I would leave that now, not cut it out now, just leave it till everything else leaves out?
No, everything, if you're quite certain that it's dead, you can cut it out right now. There's no problem at all. But if you've got green under the bark, it's potential to be able to grow. And again, Yes, I hope so too. But also on some of our trees that through all the extreme weather we've been having, go around the drip line of the tree and rebuild the soil. We talked about putting sea soil in, building that soil up and giving it some nutrient like timed release fertilizers when the season begins to be able to give a long continuous feed for those plants and making sure that in spite of water restrictions that we can get water to the tree. So it needs recovery as well as getting a pruning and a shape back to it that is going to be there. But if you see buds on the tips of the branches right now that are swelling, Susan, you're going to be okay.
Okay, that's what you're going to look out for. I sure hope so, Susan. They are so beautiful. And you've had it for a long time in the ground there. Lydia has a question about hellebores from Langley.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Hi, Lydia.
There.
Go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call. I have some hellebores that the leaves turn black during the
cold weather,
extreme frost in January. Should we cut those black leaves off?
Yes, Lydia, that's a great question. Was one of the world's top breeders in England a few years ago, and he was very specific about as soon as you have any bad leaves that really distort the look of the plant, or its potential for disease to come along, cut them out immediately, but cut them right back down to the main stem. Don't leave stubble. Cut them right back. And again, as soon as our weather turns around and we get a little later into the late winter, you'll find new growth starting to come to replace that. So no, they're easy to do, but you're absolutely right. Let's get them cleaned up and get them out of there right now.
Lydia, thank you very much. Would that be the same for if the blooms are gray this year? We have Holly and Shemanis asking about her hellebores.
Yep. Is because a lot of the bloom in sequence, you get, they don't bloom all at once. And as some finished, sure, cut those blossoms out because it prevents the plant from going to seed and encourages more new growth to develop, but also more flowers to keep coming. So absolutely cut them out when they're done.
There you go. I love that people asked about it because you were encouraging us to be interested in it. Brian, you're staying put for a while? No big trips to Europe?
Not for a while, but it's back to work. It's spring, and so many seedings need to be done, cuttings taken, and it's a brand new season we're looking forward to.
And our caller Anthony will be looking for you at the store as well. So
yeah, love to see him and help him out.
Brian, what a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay.
That's Brian Minter, our gardening columnist here on BC Today. He'll be back in a couple of weeks. And that's it for us. Thanks so much for joining us. Our email, bctoday@cbc.ca.